Prime Minister Narendra Modi has landed in Moscow just a short while back. He's all set to hold a summit-level discussions with Russian President Vladimir Putin. You can see these visuals, of course. Prime Minister Narendra Modi being given a ceremonial welcome there at his hotel, the Carlton Hotel in Moscow. He was also accorded a guard of honor at the airport. The Indian diaspora has also reached the Carlton Hotel to greet PM Modi as he begins his visit to Moscow. Russian dance groups are performing there. Also excited groups of Indians in Russia were outside to greet him. And of course, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be holding will be part of the 22nd India-Russia annual summit with President Putin in Moscow. The Indian envoy to Russia, Vinay Kumar, had said the talks will lead to tangible outcomes. Extensive dialogue on trade, economic and investment cooperation as well as connectivity will be a key focus of discussions during the visit of Modi. This is Prime Minister's first visit to Russia in nearly 5 years, also the first after the war broke out. And now we are getting visuals, of course, of Prime Minister Narendra Modi meeting and greeting the diaspora there. This is the Indian diaspora who, of course, have lined up in great numbers to meet him and greet him in Moscow. This is something we see, of course, all over the world. And Prime Minister, of course, has a special connect with the young admirers of him, the children who he, of course, is meeting there as well. PM Modi's last visit to Russia was in 2019 when he had attended an economic conclave in the Far East city of Vladivostok. The annual summit between Prime Minister Modi of India and President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, is the highest institutional dialogue mechanism in the strategic partnership between the two countries. So far, 21 annual summits have taken place, alternatively, in India as well as in Russia. Joining us at this point live is Ambassador Anil Triguniat, former diplomat. We also have Ninad Sheth, Foreign Affairs Analyst, joining us live. Pathikrit Pain, Defense Expert, is live with us. Major General Gigi Dwivedi, Defense Expert, is also joining the broadcast. Let me get started with you first, Ambassador Triguniat. All eyes on PM Modi as he begins this visit to Russia, his first in 5 years. What are your expectations from the visit?
Well, I think that 5 years is a long time to have a tete-a-tete with another major important leader. And the Prime Minister Modi and President Putin have been conferring with one another on various issues, including through various Zoom meetings and others. Yet, this is a very important meeting because we had a little hiatus as far as the summit meetings were concerned for the last 3 years. So that's why it happens to be the 22nd summit meeting, which is very important. And of course, its optics are also very important because this is immediately after President Putin has taken over recently at the 5th time, and Prime Minister Modi has taken over the 3rd time. And so it's sort of a continuing with the most highly important and significant institutional dialogue mechanism where everything, the whole gamut of relationship is discussed, every issue is taken care of. But prior to that, of course, as you know, there are large number of institutional mechanisms between the two countries, and there are two major joint commissions that meet. One deals with the trade and other aspects, and technology and investments and others, and the other the military technical cooperation. And therefore, whatever the recommendations, issues, others are fed into the leadership at the leadership level, which are mostly discussed either in the bilateral, which Prime Minister Modi today is going to have a private dinner with President Putin. At that time, he'll have a free frank discussion, or tomorrow, when he has meetings in the restricted format, in which he plus 1 or 2 maximum people are there. And then there is the delegation level talks where everything is discussed. So this is a relationship for subsequent, sufficient consequence, I must say. And therefore, the major issues, of course, we know about the bilateral what are there. But one of the key important things that we are going to discuss, in my view, is the Russia-Ukraine war and the Middle Eastern war and their impact on the global south. That will also matter there.
Yes. Okay, let me get in Ninad Sheth as well into the discussion. Ninad, as far as your analysis is concerned, what do you believe will be on the table in this dialogue, in this summit between the Indian and the Russian sides?
You know, I'm going to give you an analogy of that famous Russian doors that we have seen, where you open one and another one of the same kind comes in and so forth for 4 or 5 or 7 sequences. This is a multi-layered relationship. You open first and foremost, this is a relationship in the context of the Ukraine war. There is a very interesting development here that, India's traditional reliance on Russia still hasn't gone down when it comes to weapons import. It's very important that India still imports about 65% of weapons from Russia, including about 80% of weapons for our army. That relationship is going to be very important. For the first time, there are signs that India may be also giving ammunition to Russia through perhaps directly, perhaps indirectly. So that's interesting. But the other facet, the other two facets which are interesting in the last 5 years, as you mentioned, India and Russia's trade has gone up to $78 billion. But the problem here is that $66 billion is imported from Russia and very little, say $4 to $5 billion, is exported from India. There's a huge imbalance in the trade between India and Russia, and I think the Prime Minister will probably be discussing it with the Russian leader. The third interesting aspect for us is that, as you open those doors, suddenly, you see a terracotta warrior springing up. I mean, the China factor. The Russian-Chinese relationship is now so close that, the historic reference points cease to exist. Perhaps the Prime Minister will stress the fact that, India needs Russia, but India needs Russia to be sensitive of its China concerns. And I think that, this will be very, very important in this particular relationship. Lastly, I probably think that, the issue of free, cheaper oil will be discussed. India's energy security will be discussed because, India needs to have that pipeline open. So energy security, defense, as well as political affairs. And finally, I would like to say that there's a BRICS summit. I beg your pardon. There is a summit, of the Quad also likely to happen around this time. So India is signaling, at the highest level, its diplomatic push towards multipolarity.
Absolutely, and Anand, stay with us. Let me also, in fact, quickly bring in Pathikrit Pain. Pathikrit, clearly, of course, this is a keenly watched visit, I'm sure by China as well as by the United States of America, isn't it, Pathikrit? Because a lot hinging on the India-Russian relationship in the current geopolitical realities of the world.
Well, Uday, there's a considerable amount of geopolitical churning that is going on in the world today. So, against that backdrop, it's not surprising that some of the countries are having jitters concerning Prime Minister Modi's visit to Russia. But I think India has always, made it very clear that it has dehyphenated its relationships with different, power centers. For example, even before this visit, Prime Minister went to the G7 summit, met many of the leaders who are major power centers of NATO and the Western Hemisphere power blocks. So they cannot complain. They cannot say that Prime Minister Modi or India has isolated itself from the West. So they may have a problem with us, but we have always ensured and said to the world that our friendship with Russia is not at the cost of the West, and vice versa. So far as China is concerned, yes, China is an adversary. There are areas of status quo and divergence between India and China. So I think from that perspective, continuing with the strategic partnership with Russia is important. And I think it's important from the Russian perspective also, considering the fact that today, if Russia has become very close to China, a lot of it has to do with the kind of attitude the West had towards Russia, as a result of which it has pushed literally Russia into the arms of China. So from that perspective, ideally the West should be happy that India is probably one of the very few countries in the world, or probably the only country in the world, which has extremely good working relationship both with the West as well as Russia. So it helps them. From the Russian perspective, they would also want more investments from India to come into Russia, because of the fact that they also want to hedge against China. They know that, right now, because of situations, they have no option. But the issues of encroachment that is happening in Eastern Russia from China, or the issues of conflicts in the past have not gone down. It's not a forgotten history, or it's not a forgotten reality about encroachment that's happening. So I think, as I stated, there's a global geopolitical churning going on. Just as India is extremely optimistic about the India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor, similarly, India is betting a lot on the international North-South transport corridor, which will start from Russia and end in India, because it reduces the price and time of commodity shipments from Russia to India and vice versa through that multimodal transport network that is being created, it reduces time and cost by 30 to 40%. So I think India is diverging or diversifying its basket of resource mobilization beyond the conventional area. So I think when it comes to relation between Russia and India, it is not going to get any more restricted to defense or energy security only. These are extremely critical areas, but I think trade will be given a lot of impetus. Russia wants, as I stated, Indian companies to invest in the Russian market, especially in consumer durables and FMCG sector. It has to be seen how much the Indian companies actually responds to that, because many of them have foreign institutional holding from Western, countries and companies. So they might be a little jittery about consequences in terms of sanctions from the West. But I'm sure over a period of time it will be sorted out. Another important aspect is the possibility, and which has already started perhaps, of a lot of Russian companies or Russian institutional investors investing in the Indian market as a result of the rupee ruble payment settlement mechanism being settled down, and now they're allowed to invest the accumulation of rupee they have as a result of this imbalance in trade into the Indian market. So it's also it's a good signal overall. You never know. At the same time, you might say that the Americans also have not given up on their relationship with China because of just because they have a problem with China. The trade between China and United States is $750 billion plus. So I see no reason why we should give up on Russia. And I think Russia has been an age-old friend, a traditional friend, time-tested friend when it comes to critical technology. In the next quantum leap of growth that we are looking forward, we require access to a lot of critical technologies. Some of those critical technologies, we have collaboration with the West as well, but they might be a little apprehensive about sharing those things. I think Russia has been far more forthcoming in terms of sharing technology. Of course, both sides should benefit. It cannot be one-sided at all. I think there are areas which will open up, which hitherto was never explored beyond energy and defense. So, but also one thing, we must understand Russia was the first country, and President Putin also mentioned that there has been foreign interference in this election that happened in India. We know what kind of pressure Russia has been facing. Russians acknowledge that India has been under a lot of pressure during Prime Minister Modi's regime from the West for various reasons. But he said that Prime Minister Modi always keeps India first when it comes to national interest. So I think areas of convergence are shaping up. It will all depend on how the Ukraine conflict comes up. There are areas of convergence, my last point, on unilateral sanctions that the West has a tendency to impose, the one that has been imposed on Russia. It is the smaller countries which, suffered the most. There are convergence when it comes to the sanctions that the West impose on dollar. They freeze their foreign exchange reserve. I think both countries agree that it should not happen. There is a convergence in terms of Russians being pretty supportive of India becoming the voice of the global South. So I think this relationship over the next one decade will blossom even more, given the geopolitical churning that is going on, and given the fact that we are moving more towards a multipolar environment, which the transition phase may not be very easy. There will be,
Yes.
a lot of problems.
Yes,
So,
in fact, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has just put out a statement as well. Major General Gigi Dwivedi, let me quickly rope you in here. Major General Dwivedi, Prime Minister, of course, has put out a statement talking about the fact that he's landed in Moscow and that he's looking forward to deepening the strategic and special partnership between India and Russia. Where does that partnership stand currently, and where do you expect it to move post this visit by PM Modi to Moscow? Major General Dwivedi.
Well, being the last speaker, I think I need to bring in fresh points because most of the points have been covered. But I like to focus on three important issues. First and foremost, when you look at the bilateral relations between India and Russia, it has to be seen from the prism of larger geopolitics, because currently the globe is in state of flux and new alignments are coming up. What India is trying to do is to position itself so that we are not seen either biased or tilted to any particular bloc. And case in point is that India has been, has shown a global outreach. We are with G7, we are part of Quad, We are also in the various other initiatives like India, West Asia, Europe Economic Corridor, and at the same time we are engaging with both Southeast Asia as well as West Asia. So point number one is that India today has multiple outreach, and therefore that is the balancing that is taking place. Secondly, coming to India-Russia relations, these are time tested. Since the Cold War, India has been a close friend, strategic partner of Russia. And case in point, during 90s, being a defense officer, being a person dealing with defense, we had 90% of our air force requirement on Russia, 70% of our arms and equipment were Russian origin. Even today, while we have diverse to France, to America, still 36% of our weapon systems still come from Russia. Secondly, is the point you raised about the oil and the adverse balance of payment. Well, we have been importing 1.78 million barrels a day through last about 2 years, and this adverse balance of payment has actually helped us. In 2023, we saved $25 billion in foreign exchange as far as the oil is concerned. The third important point is China, because having been defense attaché in China, I followed this country very closely. And when I was there, I used to ask the Russians, why are you selling these sophisticated weapons like Su-30, Su-27 kilo submarines? They said that today we need foreign exchange. But let me tell you, Russia and China have no love lost. As far as China is concerned, they hate two countries. One is Russia, one is Japan. In what order they are, I left it to anyone's imagination. And my last point, which I wish to make, is that relations are dynamic. Relations are governed by your national interest. And there are no permanent friend, no permanent enemies. So you try to draw maximum from the countries or from the situation as it suits us. And therefore, India is investing in Russia, but at the same time, we are also investing in all the other global partners, because that's where the interest lies. Because today, whether we accept it or not, India is a global player. We have the capacity to actually tilt the balance. Whichever group we join, there'll be imbalance oblique rebalancing. So all I can say is that India's relations with Russia are important. So also our relations with the other countries, and every country is trying to get the best out of it. So does Russia and India, because that's where the geopolitics and the defense and diplomacy is. And last point is about the Russia-Ukraine war. You raised this issue. Well, India has a certain amount of say, but we by ourselves cannot influence the outcome. But today the war is in stage of stalemate. Of course, tactical operation will go on, but strategically war is in stalemate, and there's a kind of a atmosphere or kind of condition that lend to negotiation, because Russia today can claim victory because they have 20% territory of Ukraine, and Ukraine claim victory because they are not raised their hand, they have not been defeated. So to that extent, I think certain amount of groundwork will help to put the war to an end, and India is a neutral player because we have no axe to grind. Uday.
Yes, that's something that can't be ignored. The fact that, this is the first visit after 5 years, but it's also the first visit, Ambassador Trigunyart, after the conflict broke out between Russia and Ukraine.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, and that's why I said that the Russia-Ukraine war, its outcome from day one, Prime Minister Modi has been talking to President Putin as well as President Zelensky, and has been advocating the cause of peace through dialogue and diplomacy and respect for the UN Charter, which means territorial integrity and sovereignty. Now, Russians do understand. President Putin has listened to Prime Minister Modi. He has said he's ready to do that. Now, currently, there are several proposals are running around, but nobody is agreeing to any. So, therefore, some kind of a semblance of sanity has to prevail in the international discourse in order for this war to end somehow. And the security concerns of Russia are equally important, as is the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. So I think that that's where countries like India, which are trusted, and can help navigate to some extent, not fully as General Ruby said, but definitely there has to be a starting point, and the starting point happens because, President Zelensky also requested India to play a greater role. And so have the Americans, and everybody else is asking. They know that today only country that has a credible access to Kremlin is India. And Prime Minister Modi's personal chemistry and relationship with President Putin is very well known. And President Putin has repeatedly eulogized Prime Minister Modi and India for the kind of course that India has taken, whether it is a strategic autonomy or its growth trajectory. And we have problems, no doubt. But I feel that as far as Russia, China, India dynamics is concerned, my view is that due to the current geopolitical scenario and the contestation between US and the West as against Russia, Russia needs China to counter the West. That's their calculation. That's why the relationship has strengthened. But Russians are equally cagey about the hegemonistic or the expansive influence of the Chinese into their own Far East or other territories and Central Asia and others. And that's where they require India to leverage their strengths there as well. So I think it is something we are in a good sweet spot, and we need to work on it. Besides, we have to serve our own national interest. Our national interest is served from wherever, whichever country. So India has diversified its defense relationship. It has diversified its other engagements, technology procurements, but even in the technology transfer, Russia is the only country, as Patkir mentioned also. I mean, this is the one country that has been providing technology from the beginning. And BrahMos is one of such examples. And there is just now, there is this major gun that is going to be used by Indian forces has just been launched. So I think that we have to look at it, space, nuclear power, everywhere else. And now today, Russia is in a good position by virtue of, I would say, the accumulation of Indian rupee, that they can have strategic investments in India, whether it is in Make India campaign, defense, infrastructure or others, that will pay them well, good dividends later.
Yes, Ninad, come in here on that shadow of the war, which also, of course, hangs over this meeting. Will that be the elephant in the room, or do you expect it to come up in the joint declaration or the dialogue?
It is very tricky at one level to be multipolar. It is not an easy ride to take. India, while it is playing this dance, has to be very careful to not alienate the West beyond a point, and yet, play its own sovereign right. So in this dance, yes, the Ukraine war will come up. I don't think that the Prime Minister is in the habit of lecturing other countries. What may probably come up are solutions possible, or hearing the solutions possible from the Russian side, understanding the Russian perspective, and then perhaps, taking that forward from there. For India, Ukraine is far away. For India, personally, if you ask me, what will come up in this room are going to be the immediate concerns of both countries. And for Russia, please understand that Russia is quite isolated right now globally. And for Russia also, it is very, very important to court India. By courting India, it opens space for itself, makes space, diplomatic space for itself on the global scale. So, in many ways, the Prime Minister is in a favorable position because Russia needs that diplomatic space much more than it has ever needed before. And China alone, does not fill that space. So to my mind, this is a very important visit for India if it plays its cards well. We forgot to mention a very interesting thing which is not often discussed. We import 30% of our fertilizer from Russia. Our farmers depend on Russia. We do not realize it, but Russia is a very, very important source of fertilizer. So, these little mundane but extremely important things will come up. Like I said, India has a very good hand when it comes to playing this particular, round of poker. But that round of poker has to be played carefully.
All right, let's leave it at that. We've run out of time. My thanks to our guests for joining us.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.